Well, my name is Jason Preston. I'm awfully glad to be here today and thankful for the opportunity to chat with you guys. I just thought I'd give you a little background on how I came here and how I got to where I'm at today. I actually got my background in public education. Thought that'd be a great thing to spend 4 years in college working on. And after getting that degree, my wife came to me and said, I don't think this is going to work out. So you better get a real job, or we're going to have to do something different. So I ended up getting involved with some marketing guys, and we ended up doing marketing and had a great experience. Worked with Costco and all sorts of different companies, Franklin Covey, and ended up getting involved with Henry Schein. And eventually Henry Schein came to us and said, hey, there's a real need with our dental office for marketing. And so we thought, well, that's a great opportunity. It's a great market and a great partner. And so we formed a partnership with Henry Schein and went out and started doing all these great marketing plans, strategy of these offices. And after a while, we came to realization that kind of we're barking down the wrong tree. We started really understanding the industry and some of the struggles that these offices went through trying to grow their businesses. The economy started turning south, and all of a sudden we realized that the total solution wasn't just getting people in the office. In fact, what we realized, it doesn't matter how many people we get in the office if they all walk right back out the back door. And so, I left that eventually, trying to figure out a solution, left that partnership, and ended up meeting up with a couple great leaders in the industry. Rick Hendrickson, who was running the Dexis business and been very successful running that for several years. A guy named Lee Allen, who had been very successful, a little company called Guru. And as we came together and started focusing on these issues, we really realized there was no one really focusing on what we saw as the most important thing that happens in a practice is not necessarily getting the patient in, but getting the patient to come in and move forward. And the ADA, a lot of the leaders have seen this. In fact, the ADA came out recently and talked about a report. In fact, you may have seen this, I think it came out at the end of 2013, where they talked about how the average income of dentists have declined since the mid-2000s. They've talked about how dentists say they're not busy enough. Others saying they're having to work harder to make the same amount of money. And the frustrating thing is the ADA said, this is the new norm. And what are we going to do to adjust that? The cheese has moved, so to say, and how do we adjust with this new norm today? And, statistically, one of the things that we found is we look closer at what's happening in the industry. It's fascinating. We can take a look here at some of the numbers, and what we find is a couple things. The average practice case acceptance rate, about 35%. So 100 people walk in an office, 35 of them are walking out and accepting treatment. What's happened to the other? That big group that's walking out the door and not accepting treatment. What we find even more disturbing is on these bigger cases, the cases that matter even more. These cases over 5,000. If you take a look at what's going on, it actually drops down to 15%. 15% acceptance rate. And just as fascinating as we continue to dig, what we find is most offices think that their case acceptance rate is 80%. Totally out of touch with what's really going on. And the reason is no one's tracking it. The consultant sales, even great programs like Dentrix, which is phenomenal, doesn't track it unless using spreadsheets. And so, as you look and you notice here, with all the leaders talking about it, saying, hey, we've got millions of dollars in our filing cabinets. They tell us, that we're losing out on an average of $23,000 a month in those people that are walking out the door and not accepting treatment. And the list goes on. So these leaders in the industry are saying, hey, well, this is something that needs to be focused on. So the question is why? What's going on? Why aren't more people saying yes to treatment? What's holding them back? And that's something that we've asked a lot of dentists. We've got a lot of feedback. And the number one thing we hear is, well, they don't have money, or they don't see the value in it. And as we look at this slide from USA Today, we see some fascinating things. First off, it says, guess what's going on? People are spending money on big screen TVs. They're spending money on their recreational vehicles. They're spending money on you see your patient with your iPhone and their iPads, their designer purse. But how about number 4? What does number 4 tell us? This spending being up on organic pet food. Who was buying organic pet food 5 years ago, 10 years ago when everyone had more money? Is it fair enough to say that people didn't have the money for it, then they didn't value it? So what changed? How come all of a sudden today we see this huge spike in organic pet food? Is it that the pets are saying, you know what, doggone it, I'm not eating another thing till you give me organic pet food? You know, it's not. The question is why? Why then? Why have we seen this huge change? And the reality comes down to this one thing: education. Education through marketing. What we've come to see is people what we've research told us is that people's values hinge and hang very much on their knowledge. Knowledge is power. And the more they've been taught that they need to spend more money on organic pet food to help their pets live longer, people want to do the right thing and they're doing it. So how does this apply to us in dental industry? What can we learn from that? Is it about people not having money? Or is it they don't get it? In fact, let me ask you this: what's the biggest difference between, you know, this group right here, including your teams, and your patients? You know, it's one thing, and that's your IQ. So the next thing we're going to look at is what are our patients' dental IQs? How much do they understand? Well, the ADA knows, and they did a report, and guess what? No surprise, they score a D for knowledge of oral health. They just don't get it. And you know what? When we look at how we've been doing this over the past, you know, we're drawing on pieces of paper, we're using models, and none of these things are necessarily bad. But what the bottom line is, what we've been doing, talking to the patient, and they're not sitting in the chair, hasn't been cutting the mustard because they've been coming to the dentist their whole lives and they still score a D. But one of the things we look at is that we live in a different world. Especially it's changed so much in the last even 10 years. That you walk into a high school, a college, an elementary school, and the teachers and students are all teaching with iPads. We've become so media, depend on that medium. We're so used to that for communicating. But yeah, what do we do in our office to communicate with our patient base who's evolved into this type of learning styles? So that's one principle. The other thing we know is, it's about educating, but the reality is, and this is something that Lee and Rick and the team figured out, is it's not just about educating better. It's not just about teaching the patient better. And what we're not proposing is that this is going to be simply, we're going to win this battle by playing more videos for our patients. That's not the solution either. Is it important? Yes. One of the things that the rest of the business world looks at is something called the buying cycle. That for hundreds of years they found that people go through a process when making buying decisions, and they call that the buying cycle. We've broken it down. We're calling it the case acceptance cycle, and apply that to dentistry. But it's the same process. And the better we understand how our patients, the experience they go through when they're making buying decisions, the better we're able to help them go through that in our office. And so that cycle goes through really a series of 6 steps. The first step is they have to be aware. If they're not aware of your office, if they're not aware of what an implant is, pretty likely they're not going to choose an implant. The second is they have to consider, implant versus bridge versus doing nothing. Once they see the value, then they have to trust. Have to trust the doctor, have to trust the process, have to trust that the whole experience is going to go well. Once the trust is there, then they have to take ownership. And I think there's no reason to not look at the rest of the business world and learn from some of the things they do. For example, when you go to buy a car, what do they do to get you to take ownership? They want you to really drive that experience on your own, to really want it. They hand you the key and say, go ahead and take a drive, and you get in the car and you go on a test drive. And that's when all of a sudden it goes from looking at the car and thinking it's neat and thinking it's cool to, wow, I want it. Apple, same thing. You walk in an Apple store, what do? There's no cash registers. Instead, what do you see everywhere there? iPads, iPhones, toys to play with, interaction. How are we getting our patients engaged? What are we doing to get them to take ownership? And we're going to talk a lot about it because that's one of the most important things we can do with our patients, is get them to own the problem and to get them to drive it. No one wants to be sold, but everyone likes to buy, and that's the key, is we've got to get them to want the solution for themselves. So they take ownership, they accept, and ideally they send referrals. So now, understanding this process, the importance that our patients go through it, what we know is this doesn't just happen when they sit in the chair with us. We can't expect the minute they sit in the chair and we start to talk about a treatment plan that we can run through that whole process. So one of the things we look at is, what are we doing from the very beginning, from before they come to our office all the way through until they leave, to drive them through that process. And so we really look at 6 steps that we've seen where we can really make an impact. First is our website. It's the first place we come in contact with our patients. What are we doing on our website to drive them forward and to raise that dental IQ? Second, I know a lot of us are great at sending out reminder emails, reminder texts, and it's phenomenal, much better than what's been done in the past. But something that's lost that was powerful is sending out those reminder, a newsletter, a welcome packet to a patient. So we're going to talk about what we can do there that's even more effective than that. We're going to talk about the lobby. What do we do in there? We only have so much time with our patients, and we're not educating them, no one else is. So we're going to talk about what we can do in the lobby. We're going to talk about Chairside. And to me, that's one of the keys. What are we doing to help them get engaged, to help them see the value, help them participate and not just sit there and nod? And then what about that transition to the consult room? Many of you have consult rooms, some of us don't, but regardless, there's a transition from the doctor presenting treatment to whoever's getting it scheduled and whoever's getting them to commit to the finances. So how are we making that transition, and how effective are we? Because that's really one of the keys we found that's extremely important. And the last step is they go home, they talk to a family member, they talk to spouse to get buy-off. What are we doing to make sure they have everything at home, and that we're really helping solidify the decision where it's made, and that's at home. So let's go ahead and let's talk about those. Let's start off by talking about the website. We've got three objectives here on the website. We want to increase their dental IQ while they're on your site. We want to differentiate you. Obviously, they're coming to your website. Many other options. When they're there, we want to grab them. We want to show them how we're different. And we want to obviously focus on SEO. So they come to your website. They look. They see this great content. But how many people are actually going to read all this content here on the side? No one's going to read that. But what we do know is they're much more likely to hit play here and watch a video. What is that? And when they're watching that video, obviously we know they're learning more there than not reading anything at all. But what does that tell them about who we are, about what kind of office we are? We got a lot of things covered. So we have over 300 animations we can put on your website. After they leave your website, hopefully, let's say you've got a new patient. Let's just say Karen is the name of the patient. She calls, she schedules, she's impressed, she schedules an appointment, and your team does a great job, handling that phone call. And then she says, she commits to the appointment, and now she's back at home waiting a week to come in. Now, instead of just sending a text, imagine she opens up her emails and she sees this, this email presentation. It says, welcome to our office, welcome to Bay Dental. We're looking forward to meeting you. And here's the team, and meet the team, and a little bit about the team and who's on the team. She's, we talked about our office, where we're located at. One thing we know is people care about their health. So let's address that. Let's help her realize that coming to the doctor has to do with not just cleaning her teeth, but her health in general. And she hits play, she watches this video. And as she's watching this video, she learns what periodontal disease is. She learns the problems it can cause. She learns that 83% of people have some form of it, and she should be concerned about this. And as she learns about it, the next thing she learns is that having periodontal disease not only affects her mouth, but if that travels into her bloodstream and the rest of her body, all of a sudden it leads to a whole host of problems. Alzheimer's disease, lung disease, heart disease, and the list goes on, even premature birth. And I want you to think about this. As she's sitting there, watching this video, and she's learning about periodontal disease and the effect it can have on her body, what's going through her mind? And not only what's going through her mind, but how is her perception of going to the dentist changing? And no longer is it just about going to get my teeth cleaned, but all of a sudden she sees that, wow, people care about their health. I mean, let's face it. Look at Whole Foods. Look at these, people are spending money on their health. They want to look good and they want to live forever. And let's help them see the connection between what happens here in your office and here. And now how much more likely is she to show up? So the next thing that happens in that email is something powerful. She fills out this health history form. Once she fills that out, based on your standard of care, two things are going to happen. The first thing is she gets an email back, and this email tells her, boy, Karen, you know what? Based on what you've told us, you should be aware that you have a high chance of having heart disease or Alzheimer's disease, whatever it is. You're at risk here. And she watches the video that communicates to her directly based on what she's filled out. The second thing that happens once she fills out this form is, for the first time, you can data mine this form. And now, again, the reason I get excited about this is a marketing background. I know the power of not just communicating with our patients, but specific marketing to our patients based on their unique needs. So for the first time, imagine being able to say, hey, I want to send an email to all of my patients who have, maybe we look at this first box, and who who don't like their, their dentures, or aren't happy with their dentures, or can't chew with their dentures. And I want to send an email blast to all those patients who fit that criteria in my office. And I want to teach them about implants and the options that they have. Or maybe we want to send an email directly to our patients who smoke and drink coffee that promote whitening. So a very powerful tool to directly communicate to our patients based on their individual needs. And this latest release that allows our patients to do that is off the charts, powerful, and something that definitely look into. So that's the experience she has had so far. Now she comes into the lobby. She comes into the office. One of the things we all know, though, is where's her frame of mind right now. Research told us time and time, patients, anxiety, anxious, a little nervous, fearful. What are we doing right now to help ease that? Not just to show videos and throw up videos and saying, watch this, learn about this, but what are we doing to ease her and help her build her confidence so that when she comes back and she sits with you chairside, she feels comfortable, she feels at ease, the walls are down, and now she's open to learn. Well, that's one of the things we decided to tackle is to move beyond just doing videos. And one of the things that we have here is the ability to customize a presentation, to focus on that part of that case acceptance cycle of building trust. So she's here on the, she's sitting in the reception area and she looks up the screen, big screen, she sees this welcome to our office. She sees this, here's who we are and here's what we're all about. She meets, the great, good-looking doctor and finds out about all your fun hobbies and all the great things you do. And all of a sudden she realizes, hey, this is a regular person. She, maybe we have team highlights. We tell her about the team. We tell them about our mission statement and what drives us to be here every day and what makes us excited. And again, what are we doing? We're trying to, on purpose, we're trying to help her feel, relate to us and feel comfortable. And testimonials. How many of you guys are collecting testimonials? And if you're not, we got to get on that. I mean, those are huge. They're so valuable. And a powerful place to use those is right on that big screen TV. So as Karen's sitting there, she's looking at that TV, and she reads about Jim's experience and Sarah's experience and how they love the office. What's that doing for her level of confidence? What's that doing to prepare her to come chairside? How about before and afters? Let's throw our before and afters up there. We can get several before and afters in there. And then there's a time and a place. If we want to, talk about Invisalign, we can talk about Invisalign. And we can show her, a video on what Invisalign is and how it works, and she can learn about it. And so there's a place, if you want to educate, there's a place to do it. But again, it's what are we doing on purpose? Is there a strategy behind what we're doing? Or are we just kind of throwing stuff against the wall and hope it sticks? Now, marketing. Again, I do love marketing. I think there's definitely a place for it, and every office needs to be actively engaged in it because we know we're losing patients every month, and we need to be acquiring patients. But what are we doing in the most cost-efficient ways first to grow our practice? Are we promoting our social media? Are we promoting Facebook? Are we promoting Yelp? Well, let's have it up there on the screen. She's got her phone there. Tell her to check in. How many of you guys have referral programs? Not only how many do you have referral programs, but not only how many of your patients are you asking for referral? And so one of the things I believe is let's have that on the screen. So when she sits down there, she sees that, wow, here's the referral program. Bring your friend and a family member and enjoy a dinner movie on us. So it's all about that repetition. Hopefully we'll address it later when she's, after she's had a good experience as well. So now she's had that experience. Now she comes chairside, and to me this is where the rubber hits the road. The goal here is obviously not just to talk to her, and because we already know what's going on. The state of mind is she's in the chair. It's a vulnerable position. Her dental IQ, she knows, is at a 2. Yours is at a 10, and she knows it. He knows it. They feel uncomfortable, and just talking we want to avoid. What we want is to help them feel a part of the process. So one of the unique things about the program is we can actually pull in, not just on your monitors, we can use Guru on the monitors, but we can actually pull it in and use it on an iPad. And so we can sit down with the patient and not just use videos, but we can integrate their x-rays, their intraoral images, any images you want into the program. One of the neat things with what we can do with the iPad to create engagement and really instill ownership in the patient is we pull up the presentation and it plays in either English or Spanish, but we can walk right through with the patient and show them, look, here's what's going on. At any point, we can tap the screen. I can draw on it. I can talk about how biting down and explain what's happening here. They can see what's going to happen to the fracture. I hit play. It continues through the presentation. When I'm done, I can come in here and say, look, we just talked about decay. What do you think is happening in this gap right here? And how about this? When you look at this image, how much dentistry do you see here that needs to be done? You know, quite a bit, right? And one of the things I've had the privilege, you know, as I've worked with a lot of phenomenal dentists, one thing I've learned from some of these guys is how to go from talking about just this issue to moving to get the whole quadrant done. Because one of the challenges I hear that a lot of offices have is they don't want to be seen as salesy. The patient comes in, they don't want to be too aggressive and say, well, you need to take care of all this, when obviously they haven't taken care of it yet. And so what I've learned is they come in here and the first thing they do is they change the color, and then they hand it to the iPad to the patient. And they hand it to the patient holds it, and they say, you know, this is your mouth. What I really want to know is, what do you see? You know, what do you see here that needs to be taken care of? What concerns do you have? And what we've seen time and time again, even though the patient doesn't have to have a hide-in like you, what they do is, what we've seen is they feel a little insecure about that when they see all these little black spots. And their natural reaction is they come in here, they start drawing all these little things that just don't look right. The things that visually just look off. And once they do that, and when they hand it back to you, what just happened? You know, you see how all of a sudden they just went from sitting idly and listening and nodding their head to now all of a sudden they're co-diagnosing. They're helping take care of the problem. They're taking ownership. So many neat things. I love it. They're actively engaged and involved. And now all of a sudden our role changes. Instead of it being us saying, hey, here's what you need to do, all of a sudden we say, well, great. Glad you saw those things. Tell me why that stuck out to you. What's your concern here? And why is it important to you that we address this? Then we say, you know, one of the things I think if I were in your shoes, I'd want to know about is if that decay gets too deep, you need a root canal. Do you know what's involved with the root canal? And they say no. So we show them a root canal video. And we teach them about how invasive it is and the cost to fix something like that and why they'd want to avoid it. And we say the good news is that's the easy thing to prevent with simply getting a crown. And let me show you some options with a crown. And we show them the different options they have. You know, very educational, very just teaching, informing them. We show them the examples, the great work that you've done in your office. And then we show them, you know, we no reason to take too much time. So we say, based on what we've shown you, which of these you think you'd be happiest? And they say, well, I really like this. So you draw X, you pass it over to them, they hold it, and they come right here, they sign their name here. You hit the save button, and once you hit save, you have a permanent record of the entire presentation permanently stored, you know, forever. What was that experience like for Karen compared to what the experience she typically has had in the dentist, in the dental office? And that's the big idea. How much more engaged is she? Whose problem is it? Where's her sense of ownership? When we talked earlier about, you know, the auto dealership and Apple, that's what they want, is exactly what you're doing right there. If you can have that kind of experience with your patient, I promise you're going to see results. So now we've had that great experience with Karen, Chairside. But are we done? Is she done? Even though she says, yes, that's what I want, she signs, we're still not done, right? Now we go to, ideally, the consult room. For those of you that have consult room, you know, awesome. Those that don't, think about it. It's powerful, especially if our goal is to do bigger cases. But if she's going, even if she's not, at some point she's going to have a transition where she's going to talk now with the treatment coordinator. So now Karen comes in and she sits down with the treatment coordinator. And we're going to focus on some of these same principles. You know, not just telling, not just showing, but we want to keep Karen involved in the process. So here's what we're going to do. Let's say your treatment coordinator's name is Jessica. Jessica's going to turn and sit down with Karen and say, you know, Karen, unfortunately I wasn't with you and Dr. Smith, but one of the things we do have is a record of this presentation that two of you discussed. Would you mind walking me through and bringing me up to speed on what happened in the Chairside? Karen says, sure, I'd love to show you through, walk you through it. Why? Why do we want Karen to do that, or the patient to explain to Jessica? Why not just have Jessica run through it? It's a powerful thing to think about. Why? Because watch what happens. So Karen turns to, you know, Jessica and says, well, Jessica, and she shows her the movie. She says, here's the video we watched. And then she, you know, next she shows her the x-ray, and then what Dr. Smith, what you pointed out to her in the x-ray. Then she pulls up the intraoral image. As she's going through this, whose presentation is this? It's hers. She has an ownership. It's her presentation. And what role is she taking? You know, she's selling it. You know, it's one thing to sit and listen to you teach me something. It's a whole other level of comprehension for me to turn and explain that to someone else. And that's what we want, is that internalization. So she shows her, here's what's going on in my mouth, and here's what's going to happen if we don't do something about it. implant or a root canal, and that's something she definitely can't afford. So the good news is Dr. Smith showed me that an example of how we can prevent it with a crown. And by the way, what does she see next? There's her signature. What a layup. I mean, how easy is that now to get that scheduled? I mean, there's her signature. Now Jessica says, well, great, let's get it scheduled. And so we've completely simplified that process. We know how the patient is. They've had that great discussion with the doctor, but their minds, they're worrying about the price. They're a little anxious. They have some anxiety. The treatment coordinator comes in. Typically, not all, but typically we hear a lot of they feel anxious. They don't want to be seen as salespeople. They don't want to be too pushy. Well, you got two anxious people sitting in a room trying to go over the numbers. Guess what's going to prevail? More anxiety. And what does that anxiety lead to? Indecision. So let's completely eliminate that. And when the patient comes and says, here's what I want to do, and she says, great, let's get it scheduled, that's the goal. Again, no one likes to be sold, but everyone likes to buy. And what are we doing on purpose to really focus on that experience, to make it smooth for that patient? And again, to me, this isn't even about guru. Partly because of my teaching degree, partly because of my marketing background. You can do these things without guru. But the thing I love about guru is it helps on purpose put these systems into place to help us accomplish this with these patients. Because the reality is they need this care. We're doing what's right for them. But if we can do it in a way that they have more ownership, there's less pressure on them, and it's a little more smooth, that's where we see some phenomenal results. So they say, great, they get it scheduled, and they say, well, I do need to run it by my husband. We know we hear that a lot, or I need to run it by especially my wife, who's the real boss that is at home. So they go home, and how much do you think the average patient retains when they walk out of your office? We know it's less than 10%. And the other thing is, when they go home to have this discussion, how much money do you think they have budgeted for this? In fact, a good question for you is, how much does the average patient budget for dental care in the course of a year period? They say almost nothing. Most don't budget anything for dental care. And so when they come to have that discussion about what the doctor told me, and the average person goes home and they show their spouse something that looks like this, what do they see? A bunch of codes, a bunch of prices. What does that lead to? Confusion. And what does the confusion lead to? Well, let's think about it. And that's what we want to avoid. No wonder, to me, it's no wonder we have a case acceptance rate of 35% as an industry. So what we found as a solution is let's take it one step further. They go home, they open their email, they hit play. The first thing they see is a beautiful picture of your team and of your office. And then they hear this, Karen, we had a great time getting to know you today. Super, great person. We're excited to get started next Tuesday. Please let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll see you next Tuesday at 10 o'clock. So once she sees that, then all of a sudden she sees the entire presentation. She can come through and show her husband, the videos. She can show him your x-rays. She can show him the intraoral images. And not just, your intraoral images, but again, whose images are these? Whose presentation is this? And what role is Karen taking now at home with this presentation? I mean, is there anything more we could want than have our patient selling, their family member the treatment with all the tools they need to help to get that decision made? And not only that, who's doing this? How many patients have this experience? I mean, think of the wow factor at home. And then she comes through and shows her, here's what's going to happen if we don't do something about it, the costs associated with it, and why we can't delay. And then she shows, here's an example of the great work he's done. I feel real confident about Dr. Smith. I think he's doing a phenomenal job. And by the way, here's my signature. How much more likely is he to now say, I get it, and to be on the same team? And again, for those of you who are focusing on growing your practice, again, we know that we already reminded her at the beginning about the referral program. Hopefully we mentioned it while she was chairside at some point, but now she's home with her family, and look what she sees in this email. That reminder to bring a family member or friend in, she sees the reminder to bring a referral in. Again, it's all about repetition. We remind her about our social media to leave that review if she hasn't. And now she leaves that review, what do you think she's going to say about your office after having had that kind of experience? I think sometimes it's important to step back and look at it from the patient's perspective. What kind of experience they typically have in. And I love this review right here because this review was left by one of our offices, or by a patient from one of our offices in Houston, a great doctor. And he gets it. He gets what it's all about. And as he leaves this, she reads this, or as she left this review, here's what she says. First of all, she talks about what a friendly office is and how great it is. But she says this. She says, more importantly, The doctor, showed to me in a comprehensive manner what needs to be done. I definitely not feel he was speaking to me in another language to where he was making a decision for me about my family. Through this new technology, I was able to completely understand my options and make my own decisions. That's power. That's the experience we want your patients to have. Again, it's not about throwing a video up on the wall and saying, watch this and walking out of the room. It's not about just talking to the patient and them doing this. We want them to be empowered. We want them to be part of the process. And what we know is if we empower them and make them part of the process, we will see results. How likely is she to move forward? So that's the process. Again, it's getting to yes doesn't just happen, in the short time we have Chairside. What are we doing on that website? What are we doing before they come into the office? What are we doing to prep them before they even show up to change the way they see the dentistry completely and the way it affects the health of their body? What are we doing when they sit in the lobby to get rid of that apprehension, to build their confidence, their trust? What do we do in Chairside to empower them, to get them involved, to get them engaged, to make them part of the process rather than sitting there just nodding uncomfortably? What are we doing in the consult room to getting them to drive it forward, to get them to drive towards a decision? And then when they're finally home, how are we making sure that everything remains intact, that they're sticking with the decisions they made? And that's really it. That's the idea. It's not trying to do anything different than what we're already doing in our offices. I mean, we already have websites. We're already sending something to them. We already have something going in our lobby, ideally. We're already spending the time to explain something where we should be, unless our focus is just to go and do this, work like a madman and not make much money because we're all doing is simple, single-tooth dentistry. We're already having that transition where someone's talking about scheduling and we're sending something home. So we don't want to change the way we're doing it. What we want to do is on purpose. What we do on purpose to do everything a little bit better. Some testimonies from different offices. But this is great, and this is powerful. This is an article that came out in Dental Economics, talks about increasing revenue, which is an issue. We talked about what dental or the ADA said about how revenue's down right now, and people want to get their revenue up. And guess what? Everyone's focusing on to get revenue up, working harder, drive, go, no rest. Well, is that the best way to increase revenue, or could there be something else? What this report tells us is that the number one way to increase revenue is you've got the patients, get them to say yes. It says this: most dentists have a case acceptance rate, and interesting, what he finds is 20 to 30%. And he says what that means is 7 to 8 of 10 people are walking out the door without accepting treatment, the treatment that they need. But he says this: if you increase your case acceptance rate to 60 to 70%, you double your revenue on the same number of new patients. Doubling our revenue. So the average practice, the average one, those here, maybe we're all a little above average, which is why we're here, but the average practice can double their revenue, not by doubling the amount of work they do, but by simply doubling those who accept treatment. That's the power. And the neat thing is, average office using Guru, seeing a 30% increase in revenue. And that's, to me, that's what gets so exciting at us. And again, Guru is great. I'm a big proponent of it, obviously. But it's not even about Guru. It's about what are we doing on purpose. Whether you use Guru or not, what are we doing on purpose to get our patients to take ownership, to focus on that experience our patients are having. And if we're willing to focus on that experience, what we know is people will make better decisions. No one wakes up in the morning saying, I want to make a bad decision. They're good people, just like you, but they can only make decisions according to the knowledge they have. The last thing I want to focus on before we wrap this up is I get a lot of doctors. In fact, Rick, who ran Dexis, he ran Gendex, he ran ICAT, phenomenal in that industry. And what he said that was really powerful to me. He says one of the reasons I left is I realized we were barking down the wrong tree. He says this world, this industry does not have a diagnostic problem. We're pretty good at diagnosing problems. What we have a problem with is acceptance. Yet we as an industry spend thousands and thousands of dollars on diagnosing. But what are we doing on purpose to focus on the most important thing, the one that funds everything else, which is getting people to say yes? What are we doing? How many of us have an actual strategy, a plan? What are we doing on purpose? And that's the thing I love about Guru is it helps us implement those systems into our office. So in summary, think about it. Think about it. What's it costing us? Where's your office at? Where are your patients at? What are we doing on purpose? How many of these patients are walking out the door that need treatment? It's not just good for you. Obviously, it's good for you financially, but it's good for our patients. And the bottom line is, don't they deserve to know what they're saying no to? And if they did know, how many of them probably wouldn't say no?